Good evening. Welcome to the July 5th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. Thanks for coming. We're glad you're with us, either in council chambers or online. As is our custom, we'll begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Colavani,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here. Great to see everybody this evening. As always, public comment will be part of each active agenda or first reading agenda item, and public comments not specific to the agenda will be heard at a point later in the meeting, just prior to mayor and council member reports. Public comment portion of these meetings on agenda items later coming up, or again on non-agenda items, are opportunities to address your village council. Please remember, this is not a debate, nor is it an open question and answer session. It is simply an opportunity to speak to the council. We have a variety of additional opportunities to engage council members, including e-remarks system, the CRC system, coffee with the council, direct email, or by phone. And everyone up here on the dais has spent lots of time in person off the dais, making themselves available to residents and businesses alike. But the public comments agenda item and the public comments portion of each specific item are intentional parts of a structured meeting. As such, we have some expectations on how they will be handled. State your name for the record. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Avoid repeating what others have already said. And please keep your comments to one visit to the podium per subject. If you forget to mention something or additional conversation brings up a new idea, please hold it until after the meeting and use one of the other contact methods to contact us as needed, or bring that comment to our next meeting. With that, we're on to agenda item 3, minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the June 21st, 2022 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 4 on our agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That too passes unanimously. And just like that, we're moving on to item 5, our active agenda. This is the portion of the meeting where we plan to take action on items previously discussed. These items will have some additional conversation tonight, and certainly will entertain commentary from the audience. Is there a motion concerning Ogden Avenue permitting?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 2424 Ogden Avenue to permit a personal vehicle sales business as presented.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the audience on this item? Comments or questions from the council? For those watching at home, these active agenda items have been discussed at least once, sometimes multiple times before, so there's not a lot of debate at this point, is typically the fashion. Automobile usage requires a special permit on Ogden Avenue. In this instance, we are essentially potentially restarting an existing, now defunct site. Will likely be restarted as another automobile dealer, having previously been one before. Not a lot of controversy here. Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Glover,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning a sales tax rebate agreement?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance approving a sales tax rebate agreement between the Village of Downers Grove and Downers Grove Imports LTD as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the audience on this item? Comments or questions from the council? I'll just remind folks that may be watching at home, this is, when we do these agreements, there is no upfront expenditure on behalf of the village. There's no ongoing commitment unless we're receiving revenue we would not otherwise have been receiving. There's no cost to the village, but it does generate additional revenue. In this instance, particularly if Poogie is successful, the more successful Poogie is, the more revenue the village will receive. This potential sharing of future revenue helps facilitate redevelopment of an unused site, which right now is kind of fallen into disrepair. We're all going to be thrilled to see it renovated. And additional benefits from such a thing include creating a regional draw. This potential dealership will likely be a regional draw, further driving with some multiplier, gas tax, food and beverage tax, and likely additional retail sales taxes. So it really is a win-win-win for the village, and I, for one, am thrilled to see it go forward. So with that, Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wallace? I'm sorry, Commissioner Jose, my apologies.
Okay.
Take it whatever order you like.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That too passes unanimously. I think you just got to get here earlier. That ends our active agenda. We have a first reading portion of our meeting. This is the portion of the meeting where we discuss items either for the first time or perhaps for the second time, but these are not items on which we plan to take action this evening. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Baker.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'll be introducing all three first reading items as they relate to the facility replacement and sustainability plan. The first two items, A and B, will be taken together. These items seek to amend the budget and financial plan, award the guaranteed maximum price, or GMP, contract, authorize staff to purchase furniture, fixtures, and equipment and other soft costs up to $2,647,985, and authorize staff to use owner's contingency up to $1,184,824. The Exhibit A GMP document has been attached. If approved, it would complete the contract with Leopardo Companies, the construction management firm that would oversee construction of the project. The financial plan for the project has been updated based on project cost estimates that were provided by Leopardo in June. In addition, updated debt service schedules have been provided by the village's financial advisor. This information has been included in the detailed financial plan document that appears as part of this staff report. To summarize, increases in the cost of construction and the interest rate environment have resulted in a total project budget of $60.4 million and an annual funding gap estimated at between $350,000 and $400,000 per year. The staff report identifies three options to address this funding gap. One, proceed with the total project budget and address the funding gap by increasing the property tax levy by $350,000 to $400,000. Two, proceed with the total project budget and address the funding gap by increasing the property tax levy by $100,000 to $200,000 and reducing or eliminating other capital projects to address the remaining gap. And number three, reduce the total project budget by eliminating approximately $1.5 million of environmentally sustainable features and reducing or eliminating other capital projects to address the remaining gap. Staff, as well as Lee McMillan with Leopardo, David Yandel from FGMA Architects, are available to answer questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any comments or questions from the audience on this item? Okay, comments or questions from the council, or just dialogue? Let's talk about what we think our next steps ought to be. Anyone want to start? Greg, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike, and to the entire staff for the presentation and all the work that goes into it. I would move forward with either option one or option two. Not moving forward with the project is not an option, and I would rather not remove the environmental features from the building and reduce the cost by $1.5 million in that way. I think we have found a tremendous source of pride in the sustainable efforts that we have made over many, many years, over many, many councils. And I think stepping away from that to save this amount of money is the wrong way to go. There's always risk when you're undertaking a project, especially a project of this size. Nobody saw COVID coming, or this project would have been in the ground long ago, probably completed construction long ago. We've had, just off the top of my head, 6 or 7 different plans in the 9+ years that I've been sitting in one of these seats. And there's always the opportunity to Monday morning quarterback, but if someone were to say we shouldn't move forward with this project now because there's this particular funding gap, I would remind them that it should have been done many years ago. The time is now. This is a problem that has gone on for far too long, and we have to fix it, and we're going to fix it. Give me option 1 or option 2. I'm willing to hear from all of my colleagues, and I look forward to moving forward with the project. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Greg. Others? Leslie, please.
Yep, I'm in the similar boat as Commissioner Jose. I don't think that option 3 should even be a consideration. We know that this is a now $60 million investment in our community, and we're a service organization, and we should be kind of leading the charge of what we want our village to represent, and environmental sustainability should be part of that. So we should be planning this building for the next 50 to 60 years, and being as sustainable as we can should be a part of that. So I would prefer 1, just because I also have, concerns for District 58 and sidewalk safety, but I would also be willing to entertain either 1 or 2, depending on, where we are in a compromise with colleagues. So, thank you.
Thank you. Rich, please.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of moving forward with this project. I mean, it's unfortunate that the costs have risen, but we live in an inflationary period, and fuel costs have gone up, and that has risen a lot of costs, and it's just something as a society that we're trying to deal with. I'm probably most in favor of option 2. We've not really had any outcry from residents near the other school, so I kind of feel that we reacted to Norfolk in an appropriate manner and listened to those residents' concerns, but I don't see people rising up, and perhaps it's because the problem hasn't materialized, or perhaps it's the potential loss of trees, or for whatever reason. I'm in favor of keeping the environmental solutions we put in here, because first of all, these, even if we tried to save money up front, it would simply increase our operating costs for many, many years. Some of these will have a very good payback period, certainly with the photovoltaic panels. And then, so that's one issue, the anti-glare features and the increased insulation and the other recovery things that will make this building operate more efficiently. The village won't see those, but the people who are here, who live in the village, will see that savings. And even though it's small, it's still something that will be ongoing. The other thing is, I don't want us to skimp on the permeable pavers and what we are doing to retain stormwater on site, as opposed to sending it downstream in St. Joseph Creek. They have enough of a problem, particularly on the west side of Denver and Woods, and I think we should do our part to help alleviate that, as opposed to adding to that. So that's where I'm at. Thank you, Mayor.
Others? Chris?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I first had a question. I think I know the answer, but is there an opportunity to refinance, similar to as someone who might be individually could refinance if rates dropped 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 2 years from now? Is that an opportunity that we have as a village on this?
There are opportunities. There are some limitations on timing and when that can be done.
Okay.
But yes, when the time provides for it.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I won't repeat a lot of what's already been said, other than to say I'm in either 1 or 2 in terms of options. I think I'm leaning more towards 1, mostly because I think we have made a commitment to the District 58 sidewalk improvements plan. Our first go maybe didn't go so well, or maybe it was our second go. Anyhow, the most recent one wasn't really welcomed, and if that pattern continues, in my mind, that's just dollars that can be put back into it. But I do feel like, as a commitment for that safety, we should continue down that path. Certainly would want to look to other council members and their thoughts as well. But I feel right now I would be leaning more towards one. I don't think either of one or two options we're locked in for 30 years, and a lot can change and things can happen. And so there are options outside of this that can help to either fund or we can readjust. I think that's all I had on that, yeah. But I would look forward to either one. I have no interest in stopping this, no interest certainly in removing any of the environmental improvements that we plan to do. And yes, while we're in a time where costs are going up and the cost to borrow money is going up, market timing is impossible. And so I think we're at a point now we should capitalize on what the last couple of years have been for us. And I think we should be moving and get this project done as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Nicole?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to be cognizant of the current economic environment as it relates to our neighbors and the strain that is putting on everyone that we live around, families, seniors. For me, I feel like number 2 is a good compromise. I have no interest in eliminating any of the environmental sustainable features. We talked about those pre-COVID. We committed to those. And we committed to those not only to ourselves, but to the public. And so that is not something that I have any interest in going back on. One, for me, I feel like increasing the tax levy, while it, we can argue dollars and cents, is, option 1 is a little bit more than option 2. So for me at this time, I feel like option 2 is a good compromise. I do feel like 58 sidewalk improvements could be put on hold as well. I know we're saying we're going to eliminate them from now, but that doesn't mean that we can't bring them back at any other point in time moving forward, should, budget allow. I think as we moved through that, a lot of us were able to see that it really was going to be removal of a lot of trees, trying to go around some of those things. And the last go, the neighborhood wasn't even in favor of it. So again, I feel like 2 is a good compromise, and that's where I'm at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Danny?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with what most of my colleagues have already said. I'm leaning more towards 2, seeing as how Rich and Nicole pointed out that, we've kind of been met with some grief over the removal of trees, and some of the neighborhoods haven't quite been on board with it. So as a happy medium, I would be leaning more towards option 2, but also could be okay with option 1. That's it.
Thank you. My thoughts, well, first I had a question. Do we still have sort of that standing parameters for refi?
Can you say that again?
We had at one time sort of a standing set of parameters relative to bond and debt issuance refis. Does that still exist?
In concept and practice, yes, but to actually technically get the authorization, we would have to come back to the council again, because right now, it's my understanding, we don't have any existing bonds that are eligible for a refi. So we didn't seek the parameter ordinance for a refi. As a practice going forward, we generally do seek parameters ordinances for refinancing existing debt based on recommendations from our financial advisor.
Okay. So once we take on this debt, it would fall into that same category. It would be a note that's out there, and we would be, to Chris's point, setting a set of criteria, and if opportunity presented itself, we'd do that. I mean, most likely, I can't speak for obviously future councils, but that premise is one that's been used by this village numerous times over the last 10 or so years, and I think the savings have been millions through those refi opportunities. This is not going to get any cheaper. We do have a unique inflationary environment right now as it relates to fuel and particularly metals. I think wood has subsided a little bit, but metals are still nearly double what they were a year ago. Everybody hopes that will come down and get under control, but even down and under control is unlikely a return to 2019. This is now is the right time to do this for a host of reasons. I don't think this hiccup in the cost component is enough to cause us to do something different. I would say that, Nicole brings up some good points. The inflation hits everybody, not just the village. And so we certainly need to be cognizant of that. We've got other things out there, right? We're waiting for numbers back on a garbage contract. Who knows? And there are still risk components to this. When we go to decide to sell this property, that'll be whatever the market is at that time. And its usage will be whatever we think we can put its best use at that time. Both of those are estimated here, but not locked in by any stretch. So this is really a question in my mind of, do we think, whether it's $59 million or $60 million, or whether the note includes X number of dollars for this property or not, do we want to go forward? And I can't imagine a situation we shouldn't go forward. I would prefer option 2 simply because I want to try and minimize cost to whatever degree we can. I do want to say, though, that I have been and remain a real proponent of sidewalks. And so if at some point another neighborhood comes and says, hey, we need help, I'll be looking for a way to do that, whether they're budget adjustments at the time. I think it's totally reasonable that with nobody petitioning us this moment and what experience has been on the last 2, to shelve this. But there's also some realities to that too, right? If somebody came with a petition and wanted this to happen, it isn't tomorrow. It's next year's budget cycle, right? At which point we can make accommodations for it. So I guess I just want to make clear that from my opinion on that 1 versus 2 is not like I'm not interested in sidewalks anymore. It's that I think it makes sense to shelve it for the moment, but would be more than happy to come back to it. I don't, I think I'll agree with everybody. I won't repeat it on option 3. I don't have any interest in that. Anybody have any other questions or comments they want to add? Rich, please.
It's important to note that a big financial impact was the Fed raising the base interest rate by 0.75 basis points. That had a direct impact on us. But, that's part of their action to get inflation under control, and that's a national thing that we have no control over. However, I'm not interested in going back to the well on this. I think this council did a good job of particularly with our newer colleagues, that we wanted to keep the momentum. We didn't want to start over again. We stuck with our partners on this for the same reason. And also the previous council was unanimous in wanting to move forward. So we have everything coming together perfectly. A year ago it would have meant almost too good to be true. Well, some things that happen in reality, so that's what we're dealing with. And we're trying to do this in a responsible way. We're mindful of our financial responsibility. I think we're doing the right thing here.
We are mindful of our financial responsibility, and we're also, I think, both this council and, as Rich said, the previous one, mindful of our responsibility for the business we're in, which is what we do here every day. It's the policing and administrative work we do. So it's not like this is entertainment or recreation. This is investing in our ability to continue to provide the services the village and the residents expect. Chris?
Yeah, I would just also add that a 4% interest rate is still extremely, extremely low. And I know that it feels big going from 2.86 to 4, but we are still at a time when these numbers are 30, 40-year record lows. So we can feel a little confident in that it's not 6 or 7 or 8, even beyond. So thank you, Mayor.
Any other comments or questions from the council after hearing this conversation? Okay, Mike, back to you.
Just based on staff's count, a majority of council expressed a preference for option 2. So when this comes forward next week, the motion language will indicate option 2 as the preference. The next item relates to the intergovernmental agreement with District 58. This is something that should look familiar, as council considered the key terms of the intergovernmental agreement back in August of last year. This is the full formal document for this partnership with District 58, entirely consistent with those key terms. District 58 will let's see, pay the village an amount equal to the estimated incremental cost for constructing the District 58 portion of the new facility. And of course, as we've discussed over the months leading up to this, a number of benefits to this partnership in terms of shared space, lower cost of construction for the community as a whole for both of these entities, and a number of opportunities that we'll be able to take advantage of when District 58 and the village are sharing facilities together. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone from the audience, questions or comments on this item? Council, comments, questions, discussion? Chris, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I said this when this came up. I think this is a fantastic idea, a great use of our combined teams in bringing forth some savings for District 58, who overlaps the village's tax base by quite a bit, percentage-wise. I think it's also important to note that the new figures do include the potential, the increase in our costs, so they're covering their portion of the increase here. And I just think this is a great stewardship of this, and I look forward to supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to add that, a lot of people like to talk about smaller government. This is creating smaller government. We're putting two governments under the same roof. We're doing it at nothing but an incremental cost. This is a savings to all of our common taxpayers, which is about 85%, give or take, of the taxpayers here in the Village Downers Grove. This is a win for everybody. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Others? Rich, please.
Yeah, I agree with my colleague's comment. The fact that we're only charging incremental costs. We're also sharing a building space, common building space. There's no way that District 58 could build a property of this size on their own and operate it at a lower cost. So I think this is the best possible solution, and I'm all in favor of this.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll just add a couple of things I've heard over the last 6 months or so. I want to kind of adjust those thoughts a little bit. One of them is I heard a comment that suggested that we were getting District 58 to pay for our building. That is decidedly not the case. One of the things that if you were to look through this thing and evaluate exactly what those incremental costs are, as my colleagues have described, they are truly incremental, meaning shared spaces, public spaces, some of the basic utilities, many of those things are really borne by us, and District 58 is paying the slight additional to really for square feet. And if you think about a house, if you add a couple of bedrooms, it's a lot cheaper than adding a kitchen and a couple of baths. So that maybe is a good analogy. The other thing was that I'd heard was that District 58 wasn't paying their share, the opposite end of it. And again, to Greg's point, and I think Rich's as well, what this does is efficiently considers the shared taxpayers. So rather than two facilities, we're doing one. Rather than having us try and charge some sort of market rent to 58 and then they just have to adjust it in their levy, we're taking this pure incremental cost. And it's an important distinction for residents who are out there trying to evaluate, what 58 decision-making process is and ours is. This is a super efficient use where they are neither getting a free ride nor are they picking up the tab. They are doing their share to try and have really efficient government and really efficient use of space. So we are thankful that they want to participate and that they're partnering up with us. I think it's a good thing for everybody, and I'm looking forward to going forward with this as well. Any other comments or questions from the audience? Hang on one second, Chris. Okay, there's none since we're in discussion mode. Please.
Yeah, one more thing to add that your comments made me think of, Mayor. I think also these two bodies being in the same building. I know that the leadership of these two bodies are in constant communication. I think this can only benefit that much further. We hear a lot about engagement, and I think in even having folks like the school district and the village in the same location, I know that will add a value that you're not going to measure in cost per square foot, but I think it's going to be a positive for the village as a whole. Thank you.
Any others? Okay, Mike, back to you.
That concludes the first reading.
All right, item 7 on our agenda tonight is public comments. This is the portion of the meeting where we're entertaining comments on items not on the agenda tonight. So if anyone has something they'd like to bring to our attention or a question they'd like to pose for future answer, please come on down to the podium and let us know. It appears there are none. There is no mayor's report tonight. Council member reports. This is the portion of the meeting where council members report out on goings-on in the community, other entities or groups that they're part of. We'll start with Danny. Anything for us tonight?
No report, thank you, Mayor.
Chris?
Nothing tonight, thank you, Mayor.
Greg?
I just want to thank everybody that came out to yesterday's Independence Day Parade. It was a great time, and the weather held off just long enough.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do we need more candy?
We definitely need more candy.
Tell Nicole that. Rich?
Second.
More candy, we need to buy more candy next year. 6 bags apiece instead of 4, that's all I have to say.
Leslie?
No report, Mayor.
Nicole?
No report, but to remind my colleagues that we discussed the amount of bags of candy purchased prior to the meeting, and we made it to Franklin, not Prairie. Thank you, Mayor.
And in defense of Commissioner Wallace, I was actually supposed to be in charge of that, and she took it over. Many thanks to Commissioner Wallace.
Teamwork is what we've got up here. Just one sort of final comment on the Independence Day. It was certainly not the day any of us would have hoped for. I'm thankful that we were able to be together as a council for the parade. I'm thankful that our residents were able to be with us and celebrate the day. I'm disappointed, like many, that the fireworks didn't go off. But we've got a problem. We have a problem as a nation. I don't know exactly what the solutions are, but ignoring it or pretending it's not a problem is not an answer. And so the decisions that were made yesterday had to be made in what we thought were the best interests of our residents and the safety of everyone, and what it hopefully, if there's a silver lining or some good to come from yesterday, perhaps it elevates the conversation just a little further on a national holiday of that particular one, to have to be struggling a little bit with how we operate. So I hope folks enjoyed their day safely and enjoyed the holiday, and we'll be all back to enjoy another one, which I'm thankful for. So thank you all for doing that. Manager's report. Is there a manager's report, Dave?
Yes, Mayor Barnett, 2 items on tonight's manager's report. The first one we will present here in council chambers, and the second one we'll take a quick recess and move over to the committee room for a discussion environment. Both items tonight will be presented by our Public Works Director, Andy Sikich, who is sitting in the Mike Baker seat right next to me. So I will hand him the microphone for a capital projects update.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'll be giving you a brief capital projects update. This has been a bit of a crazy year, with significant increases seen in some of our construction costs. It's been a challenging bidding environment for contractors. There's been material shortage, long lead times, and in addition, there is an ongoing quarry workers strike, which has delayed construction projects throughout the region, including here in Downers Grove. So I'll start with that. The strike began on June 7th. The quarry workers strike impacting roughly 35 gravel and sand quarries around the area. And these are the primary aggregate producers for most of the regional projects, such as products such as concrete and asphalt, which are now in very limited supply. As a result of the strike, many construction projects around the area are being delayed, and we currently don't know when the strike may come to an end. In fact, even after the strike ends, it will take some time for material supplies to be replenished and for the contractors to start rolling again. So it is anticipated that we may feel the effects of this through the remainder of the 2022 construction season. The majority of our 2022 capital projects will not likely be impacted by this strike. The list of these projects is shown here, and some of these have been completed already, some are only in the design phase this year, and some won't really require large quantities of asphalt or concrete. However, several projects around the village have already been impacted and have been more or less suspended until materials become available. And they're the MFT roadway resurfacing project, which involves multiple streets throughout different areas of the village. The Prairie Avenue resurfacing project, the Fairview Avenue resurfacing project, and then any in-house restoration, concrete and asphalt work that our crews do, such as patching roads, driveways, sidewalks, and things like that. That is also on hold until concrete and asphalt become more readily available. In addition to those projects, we have several projects that have not yet been affected by the strike, but which could be impacted depending on how long the strike lasts and how long it takes for suppliers to resupply their sand and gravel. And those are shown here. The sidewalk removal replacement program, the fall roadway patching, and the Lyman and 62nd project have already been bid, and they should occur this summer or fall. Other projects that are out for bid have not yet bid are also shown here. And all of them are scheduled to be completed this year, and the work should occur this fall, but these projects also require concrete and asphalt, so they may be delayed if the strike continues. At this time, we are uncertain as to how or if the strike will impact any bids that we have not yet received this year. It's an ongoing situation, and there's a high level of uncertainty. So we will continue to keep our finger on the pulse, and we will report back any future updates as necessary. At this point, really the biggest issue I'm envisioning is that some of the work we normally try to complete over the summer will likely push into the school year. So we will work with any affected schools to reduce any impacts that might have on their operations. Lastly, as happens every year, there are a few projects that have been delayed or postponed, not as a result of the strike, but for various other reasons, and those are shown here. Most of these projects should pick up again in 2023. And that is the end of my brief presentation. So I'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Andy. Any council questions, comments for Andy? Chris, please.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. One question I had, of the ones that are impacted, are these ones that have started and we're waiting on material to complete? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying? So are we talking about like holes in the ground that we're barricading around, or?
Generally speaking, no. Generally speaking, the contractors have gone out and done a pretty good job, from what I've seen, of
Okay.
filling in holes, patching behind sidewalks, putting in sod. So wherever they didn't anticipate they were going to have enough asphalt, we did not generally let them mill the surface off the existing road. So they're in decent shape.
Yeah.
We just would like to get going on them again.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Andy, are those contracts, I'm thinking back to salt challenges we've had in the past, or when that sort of gets sorted out and starts again, are we in some sort of a line that is necessarily behind, for instance, IDOT? Is that kind of the world we're operating in, or will we get started as quickly as anybody else will?
I think we'll get started as quickly as anybody else would. It really kind of will depend on which project is ready to go, which suppliers each contractor is using. There are still sand and gravel quarries out there that are producing, so there are small quantities available for certain projects. Obviously, with the IDOT projects being shut down as well, contractors are going to have to make a decision as to where they get back in line.
Yeah.
But we don't have any indication that we won't be right there in line with everybody.
Okay, great. Okay, anyone else? Thanks for the update.
Sure.
And with that, Mayor, we would ask for a recess so we could reconvene in the committee room for the last agenda item.
Thank you, Dave. We will take a 5-minute recess. Those that are here and would like to continue with us, we will be next door in our committee room. Hope you'll join us there. Thank you. To Main Street, which came out of the District 99 joint study we did on pedestrian safety. So, Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a continuation of the discussion that we started on the 21st of June regarding proposed traffic safety improvements on Main Street between Sherman and Franklin, and on Highland between Lincoln and Grant. This is an overview drawing of the project. Some of this is going to be repetitive, so bear with me. I'm just going to go through a quick summary here, and then we'll move forward. So on the 21st, we presented some information on how we arrived at this stage of the process, the current status of the project, and outline next steps. And so tonight, we're going to look at the preliminary design in a little bit more detail. It'll be more of a conversational approach using these boards, and then at the end, we'll lay the boards, as Dave mentioned, out on the table so that everybody can take a look at them. As a quick refresher, we are reviewing the preliminary design that was done by our consultant, H.R. Green. You'll hear this referred to as the PDR, or the Preliminary Design Report. And at this point, HR Green has received comments on the draft PDR from the village and from IDOT. And so what we are requesting is council direction to continue with these improvements and submit the draft PDR to IDOT for final approval. Just a brief history, again, the proposed improvements were initiated by the high school pedestrian safety study, which was a partnership between the village and District 99 back in 2019, with the goal of improving pedestrian safety at both North and South high schools. Sam Schwartz consultants were hired to prepare the study. It included extensive public engagement and was accepted by the village council in February of 2020. Out of that study came several recommendations, and the ones that we're discussing this evening relate to North High, as shown on the exhibit again, on Main from Sherman to Franklin and Highland between Lincoln and Grant. The Main Street recommendations consisted of a reduction to one lane in each direction, which is often referred to as a road diet, including protected left turn lanes or dedicated left turn lanes, center refuge island, curb extensions, enhanced lighting, traffic signal phasing modifications. Those were the recommendations that came out of the Schwartz study. And the recommendation on Highland was to construct chicanes between Lincoln and Grant. So last year, the village hired HR Green. They did the preliminary design, and it's based on traffic counts that they updated in October of '21, so they're pretty recent traffic counts. In addition, we submitted this project to DMMC for STP grant funding, and preliminarily, it looks like we will be awarded up to $1.47 million of the estimated $2.1 million construction cost. So that's still preliminary. We won't know for sure till September, but it does look pretty good that that funding is secured. Some of the key findings that came out of HR Green's work, I'm going to highlight three key findings. There are a high number of vehicle and pedestrian crashes along this stretch of Main Street. Over the past 5 years, there have been 99 crashes, 8 involving pedestrians or bicyclists, and 1 fatality. The predominant crash types are rear end and side swipe, and they're primarily attributed to the left turns that are being made from the inside travel lanes, those 2 inside through lanes. Second point is that left turning vehicles currently impede the traffic flow. So the lack of dedicated left turn lanes requires vehicles to stop in the inside travel lanes while they're waiting to turn. And this causes other drivers to do things like stopping abruptly, weaving from one lane into another. And then also the southbound through lanes currently merge from 2 lanes to 1 at Franklin. And often cars will avoid making that final merge until the last second so that they can avoid any cars who are waiting to turn left in the inside through lane, particularly at Prairie. I'm sure you've all been there. I've been there myself. And lastly, the PDR found inefficient traffic signal programming that is, again, due to the lack of dedicated left turn lanes. Left turners sit in the inside through lanes while they're waiting to turn, but the traffic signals don't know if those cars are waiting to turn or if they're going through. So the signals at Prairie, for instance, are programmed right now so that northbound vehicles get a left turn arrow in the morning and southbound vehicles get the left turn arrow in the evening, but that happens regardless of whether there are any cars actually waiting to turn left. All right, so now to the proposed improvements. Again, we've got the change to 1 through lane in each direction, which is hard to see on this big one. I'll show you a blow-up of this exhibit in a second, with the addition of the dedicated left turn lanes. This will increase safety through smoother traffic flow, 1 clear merge location, and it will separate the left turning vehicles from the through vehicles, which should result in a reduction in driver confusion and delays. Overall, the travel times through the corridor will remain relatively unchanged. So the average time it takes to travel from Franklin to Sherman northbound will be increasing by an average of about 4 seconds. Southbound, though, it will be decreasing by about 12 seconds. So that's pretty much negligible changes in either direction, northbound and southbound. This change in lane configurations also allows us to add several other features that improve efficiency and safety. The signals will be optimized to provide left turn arrows only when they're needed. The dedicated bike lanes will be added between Grant and Franklin. And curb extensions will be utilized at Grant Street to shorten the pedestrian crossing distance. And also that provides a logical termination point for the bike lanes. So with that, we'll switch to the next exhibit here. So this is kind of an overview of the improvements and kind of a blow up of a couple of just areas so you can see what we're talking about. So what you can see here is you can see the 2 through lanes and then the center dedicated turn lanes. And the orange, now the bike paths will not be orange, they will be green, like most bike paths you see, but we put them on the exhibit as orange to make them stand out, so they don't look like Parkway or anything. Those are bike lanes, the orange lines. So this is kind of the gist of the proposed improvements. You've got the turn lane, 1 through lane in each direction, and then a bike lane in pavement on the outside of each through lane.
Are they separated with anything?
They're not separated with anything. They're just striped and painted. Yep. So let's go to the next one. So this is a blow-up of the intersection at Main and Grant. So you can see here the curbs on the west side have been bumped in so that it's a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians. It also gives us a nice way to terminate the bike lanes at this intersection. And then we'll switch to the Highland exhibit. So this is the Highland exhibit, and this is pretty consistent with the recommendations out of the Schwartz study. We are expecting that this would result in a reduction in travel speeds on this block. 2 sets of chicanes are proposed, and that would result in the approximate loss of about 7 parking stalls, or parking spaces. They're not marked stalls, but parking is allowed on the east side of Highland here. So on May 23rd, as a part of this design process, a public information was held. It was attended by about 15 members of the public, and the comments collected ranged from diversion of traffic to surrounding streets, the merged locations' proximity to Ogden Avenue, the utilization of bike lanes, lighting, use of a temporary test case, and improvements on Highland Avenue. And so what we did is HR Green has actually looked at the merge location. They've analyzed the data and the applicable standards. And so they can actually locate the merge point south of Sherman Street. So what you've got on this exhibit is you've got Main Street will remain 4 lanes to about here, so to about the west leg of Sherman Street. And then the transition will occur in this area here, so that the 1 lane in each direction really doesn't start till about here. And then there will be dedicated left turn lanes at Sherman. And as I mentioned above, part of the initial study recommendations from Sam Schwartz included some enhanced lighting along the Main Street corridor. The options for this could include enhanced LED beacon lighting at intersections. It could be pedestrian and sidewalk lighting, similar to what is in the downtown along Main Street, or it could be street lighting, similar to Main Street south of Maple. So those are all kind of options available to us. I'm going to now switch back to the overall one. Yep. I'll give you just one more quick summary here, and then we will lay this on the table. So again, Ogden's over here on the left. You've got Main Street, 4 lanes to about the west leg of Sherman Street. Then you've got the transition to 1 lane in each direction. And then from Grant to Franklin, you've got 1 lane in each direction with dedicated center left turn lanes and bike lanes on the outside of the through lanes. So that's all the way from Grant to Franklin. And then up here, this is the chicanes on Highland right here. So you can kind of see where we're at with regard to the high school. It's right there. So tonight, we're requesting council direction to continue to pursue these traffic safety improvements on Main Street and Highland. If so directed, the consultant will then finalize the preliminary design report, submit it to IDOT for approval, and once that's approved, we would enter into a contract with a consultant for final design of the project, and the estimated start date of construction would be 2024. That is another overview, and we can, any of these exhibits we can throw on the table if you'd like to take a look at them.
So council, we're just looking for more feedback and dialogue amongst the council that would help us understand when and how we might want to proceed or not proceed with this project. Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you. We got to kick this around, guys, and decide what kind of direction we want to give. There's been a lot thought put into this to this point. But it still remains, at the end of the day, like any other decision we make, a trade-off that our job is to try and sort out and balance what we think the pluses and minuses of any of these decisions are. So the first thing is questions. Does anybody have any questions about what's been described? Tonight, it's important to just say what's on your mind. If we got a question, there's a good chance somebody else has a similar question, so go ahead and ask it. And let's just talk this thing through a little bit. Anybody got anything to start with?
I do have a question. Bike lane safety. Is there any more that we can do? I know this was brought up last meeting. A resident also brought it to our attention. I'm just wondering if there's anything else to make the bike lanes safe in this scenario.
Within the confines of Main Street, the road that we're dealing with, this is as much room as we have to do bike lanes without changing the entire configuration of the road, widening out curbs. The other factor to consider here is the number of driveways that are along this stretch. So when you start to talk about protected bike lanes,
It's an excellent
you have to
point.
gap them at driveways. So you're talking about
Okay.
very, very sporadic.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
What about those things that, they're like, I don't know what they are, really look like PVC tubes?
Plastic pipe.
Is that really not logical because of the amount of driveways, or is that because managing snow removal is difficult, or what causes somebody to decide to do those or not do those?
I think it would be both of those factors. The other factor is because this is a main route and we are, working with IDOT on the design, there are standards that need to be met. And most of those, if you've seen them, they are a bike lane and then there is a 2-foot wide striped area with those sticks in it. We just don't have the room for that here. We have the room to put the bike lanes in, and that's as much width as we have without, again, widening the curves out.
Other questions?
I just wonder if those would also be challenging for people who have to back out to get onto Main Street, and, if there's another obstacle that they have to worry about other than cars coming.
Could you help me understand, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but what all is happening here other than paint? There's the bump out curb right in front of North High, but beyond that, this looks like it's all paint.
Yeah, it'd be resurfacing and paint.
Okay, so that's where the 1.7 million comes in.
Well, yes, and there's also traffic signal work associated with it. There is curb work north of Grant, so where those curbs bump in,
Right, yeah.
there is curb work north of there. And just at the end of the day, it's a pretty long corridor, so by the time you get done, doing the signal work and the resurfacing and all that, it is, certainly if we can do it cheaper, we will.
But physically, what we're talking about from North High to Franklin is resurfacing and then new
And,
paint.
yep, this is basically the curbs will be in the same spot.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
We're
the
not doing-
chicanes,
we're not
right?
doing- When we say refuges, we're not doing like Prairie, we're not doing intermediate physical refuges, or are we?
We are not, because of the, just the way this corridor functions with the center turn lane. We have some striped medians. We do not have any physical barriers. Right.
And then there's also the chicanes further south, right?
Block over.
Yeah, they're a block
Yeah.
to the east.
Were the
Okay.
chicanes a separate solution to a separate identified problem, meaning speed on Highland, or were they
Yes, it's a slowdown.
an adjunct or an add-on to anticipated adjustments to Main?
No, to my understanding, they were a separate response to a concern on Highland, not in conjunction with concerns that may be generated by Main Street.
There was a general concern about speed in and around the school, to put a little finer point on it. When Sam Schwartz Company was working on that, and then one of the comments was, well, if there is any amount of diversion of traffic from Main, if there would be with this help, and the thought was it'll help control speeds.
Andy, can you talk about can you remind us what the neighborhood feedback was on Highland in regards to losing those 7 spaces?
We had a couple of people give us some comments on Highland. One person was concerned about losing parking on Highland.
Okay, but that was,
To my recollection, yeah.
Okay.
There may have been a couple people submitted comments on that, but that was mostly the comments on Highland were, yeah, we don't like the speeding.
okay.
I have a couple of questions. Have we identified where high school kids are crossing the street on Main Street, or which intersections, or is it all at Grant?
The lion's share is at Grant.
Would we have any reason to put piano key type pedestrian striping on any other intersections?
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly something we could look at. Once you start to put unprotected crossings like we did on Prairie, then you have to prefer to do considerations like we did there with signage and maybe bump outs. But at a certain point, you've got a lot of things competing for real estate.
Do we have any examples in nearby suburbs of street diets and road diets and how they've worked out?
There are quite a few examples out there. The one that I'm most familiar with is in Geneva, where Route 31 used to be 4 lanes and was converted to a 3-lane section. And that, anecdotally, discussions I've had with their city engineer, has worked out well.
Worked out well in regards to keeping traffic moving and off of other streets, or worked out well in terms of just providing additional safety, all of the above?
All of the above. Reduction, and they had the same sideswipe, rear end accidents, things like that. Reduction in those. The fear of traffic moving off to other
Yep.
streets, anecdotally, again, according to their city engineer, was not realized.
Okay.
And there's the FHWA. It's a common discussion to be had when a municipality is looking to do this. So the FHWA has come out with several reports and primers and documents to show all of the things that have been done that have proven that the concept is safer and does not impede traffic.
So we thought there'd be the modeling suggests there'd be a reduced southbound time, transit time, is that right?
The model does suggest it's marginal, it's 12 seconds, but yeah.
But I mean, when you think to the common eye, you take a look at this, and the first picture in your head is people lined up forever, can't get through. It's hard, I think it's a little bit hard to process, that there might be, any reduction, that it wouldn't just be stacked up.
I think in my mind, it made sense when they came back with that recommendation, because when I drive south on Main, there's a lot of times somebody's waiting to turn left at Prairie. And I have to either wait behind them, or I have to get over and then get back. So I think we already have a 2-lane to 1 merge southbound. We're just moving that from where it is now to north of the high school to make that corridor safer. So I think overall, the corridor pretty much doesn't surprise me that it gets a little more efficient with this. I mean, what you will see longer stacking queues, right? Because right now you've got 2 lanes for cars to stack instead of 1. So queues will look longer, but they will, similar to the Washington discussion, they will clear faster because of the efficiency. So that's, I think, what you're going to see, is longer queues that clear faster.
How much is
That makes
of
sense.
that is based on the signal timing adjustments? Is that a large factor in moving this traffic through quicker, or is that an incremental?
I can't say. I think it's a little of both. I think it's a little bit of cars not having to wait behind someone making a left. A lot of times if you're in that left turn lane, it may look like your queue is shorter, but 3 cars ahead of you is making a left, and now you're not going anywhere until it clears. So I think it's probably a little bit of both. Would be my guess.
But there's room for signal optimization that we're not currently realizing that we could realize should we move forward with that.
Because of the introduction with the dedicated turn lanes, right?
Yeah.
Because right now, we're giving a turn arrow regardless of whether or not people have to turn. So the signals would then be optimized where they don't give a turn arrow if there's nobody waiting there to turn. So then there's more green time for through traffic.
And it wouldn't slow traffic going in the other direction.
Correct.
Who has to wait for the green
Right,
arrow to clear.
Right.
Do we have any sense the volume of traffic that's experienced, let's say in front of North, how much of that volume is still there south of Franklin?
I can get those numbers. It's a fair amount. I mean, south of Franklin through downtown, you're talking more than 10,000 cars a day. So I don't think it's much of a reduction.
So, I'm just trying to, again, anecdotally and to the layperson, gauge the likelihood of people seeking alternative routes. And but downtown is already a problem, right? If you're driving, it's difficult. You're stacked up, whether it's at the train tracks or wherever. So if most of those cars that are on that northbound have already experienced or are already planning to experience the downtown, it may not seem like a big thing to move.
We're also talking about, in each direction, it's the peak hour traffic, right? I mean, so it's a fairly short amount of time when we're talking about the peak numbers. The rest of the time, traffic flows pretty well in the corridor, so.
It's come to my attention that there was a petition submitted to help the flow of traffic northbound on Forest to Franklin and over to Maine. What do we have to do to factor that type of planning in with this project?
So those may be working at opposite and cross purposes. This project is trying to make it easier and more efficient to move north and south on Main. My understanding, the petition would result in giving less green time to Main to allow more folks to make a movement from one of the side streets, which I think was Franklin. So just to be clear, those would be, I think, different and perhaps competing requests for signal timing changes at the same signal.
Could we model a scenario that would show us, use the same model that we did to come up with these numbers to see what the impact would be?
If council directs us to do that, we could. I just want to point out that at first blush, in our discussions, those might be at cross purposes.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think we have one opportunity to study this. And modeling software is probably pretty easy to change the scenario. So it's not a huge amount of time. Or else I'll just keep talking about it like every other week until either I go away or it goes away.
It's tempting. I don't know whether it's easy or hard, but it does seem like that's been talked about in a variety of settings, right? Whether it's a petition or it's all these conversations we had on Forest. It seems like we should have a clear understanding of that. Or at least as clear as we can get.
So Andy, you're involved in making these recommendations. Any big concerns you have?
Nothing outside of what's been presented, no. I think the project is what it seems to be, and it's a matter of a discussion of the improvements, whether you like it the way it is or whether you, would prefer this option.
So I would just make a couple of comments. I really like the bike lanes. I understand everybody's concerned about them not being separated physically. I think that's fair. But I see these types of bike lanes all over. And I think it is an opportunity to expand that, especially around the high school. For me, I think, just to be totally candid, it feels like the right thing to do. This is designed to improve safety, to keep traffic moving at the same pace, to alleviate some of the challenges the 4-lane has. There's preliminary thoughts that we're going to have most of this paid for if I'm being honest, I think the only thing that would keep us from this is some of the previous challenges we've had with residents and their concerns on traffic flow and those types of things. So that's what's I've got me torn a bit. And I don't want to, certainly don't want to discount their concerns. But I think if our objective here is to, as it was, I think the request was back in February of 2020, was to improve the safety, this appears to check a lot of the boxes for me. And clearly, in a way that seems to have minimal impact. Certainly don't know, but it feels right. I think it's going to be, candidly, the will of this council to decide if we want to head down that path in a way that is potentially going to stir some things up. And I understand everyone's concern on that. It's not something we would take lightly, but my initial feedback here is this feels right, and I could see supporting it.
And just to build on that, if this council says to us next week in a formal motion, proceed to the next step, that does not obligate us to construct.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Right, that's true.
What is that likely duration? So we'd, if we did that, we'd submit to IDOT, and we'd get an IDOT, theoretically, it all goes positive, right? We get an IDOT approval, we get a DMSC award, but what is that before, at the point where we, have to go, no-go? What is that for us?
It's hard to say with IDOT's turnaround times right now, so it could be a while. But we envision construction in 2024 if we were to move forward. So I think what that would say to me is probably by the end of this year, early next year, you'd see a design contract in front of you for review and approval to do the final design. Now in September, DMMC finalizes their grant program. So at some point, they will say, yes, you're getting the grant, or no, you won't. And so in September, if we were not to move forward, then we would say we don't want the money, and they would give it to somebody else.
I want to go back to Highland a little bit. If I'm understanding, that really was largely driven by speed concerns on Highland Avenue. I'm a little surprised they were only in that block. Is there any comment specific to, we really don't think there's any speed concerns in the next block south, or was it the only block studied, or how? Talk a little bit more about how that came to be.
Do you recall?
I don't recall. We can double check that.
Yeah.
I hate to guess on the fly here.
Right.
Sure.
Okay.
A lot of the stuff we deal with is, this weird spot between anecdote, experience, and science, right?
Yeah.
So I'd just like to know if that was part of what was thought through, and if it was a conscious decision that it didn't seem like a problem, or...
So whatever we find, it's important to remember that the Sam Schwartz report and study was very planning and not much engineering. So I don't know whether we'll find specific commentary on which exact block, but we'll double check. But regardless of what that study shows, when we get to the preliminary phases of engineering, we could explore additional blocks too.
I guess what I would like to know is if south of that was just beyond the scope of Schwartz's consideration. If it was, then I'd be interested in hearing more about a little farther review.
Gotcha. And I'm a little embarrassed to ask this question, but is there restrictions on turning on Highland off of Ogden? I drive by it every day, but I never take
Yes,
Highland.
there are.
There are no left turn from westbound traffic.
Westbound.
Okay. Okay, no left turn. Okay.
Washington?
No.
I have sort of an esoteric comment, and I'd like to make some general comments. I've noticed where two of the chicanes are located are opposite the driveway. And we have a situation on our street where there's always an issue if a car's parked behind the driveway of cars hitting another car. And I would sure rather have a chicane there than a car, because then you're not dealing with an insurance company and all of that. So that was my esoteric comment. My more general comment is I was skeptical of this, and then I know some of our residents are, but I got to tell you, more than any staff report I've read since being up here, this concisely answered my objections. These 4 pages, better than anything, and every concern I had is laid out here just so nicely. So I would just challenge any residents who's saying, "Well, you guys are crazy. Why are you doing this?" Just read this. Take time to read 4 pages. Where I'm almost to the point where if a citizen writes into me, I'm going to say, "Have you read this?" And please spend, I don't know, how long does it take to read 4 pages? A couple of minutes? Please take 2 or 3 minutes, read this, and then we'll have a more intelligent conversation. So I don't always take staff recommendations carte blanche, but I'm kind of all in on this entire thing.
I'm not hearing any big objections, and not hearing any, except for Greg's about to wave at me.
No, I just figured because I wasn't here the last time we talked about this, I figured I'd go ahead and weigh in. The only comment I've really got is that I think the piece kind of leading up to the school from Ogden, I think I'd prefer to see a more physical, sort of refuge in the middle as opposed to the striping. But even that's sort of a minor objection. I think maybe even more than you, Rich. Not just skeptical. I was walking into this concept thinking no, thinking that it was going to disrupt traffic, that it was going to end up slowing everything down on Main Street to such a way that it was going to distribute it all over the place. And that is not the case. That's simply not the way the study bore itself out. So I can't see any reason to say no. It's going to improve safety. It's going to improve the traffic flow. Why would we not do it?
And I've noticed on Main Street is I've been now paying attention to these things, and I've pretty much experienced all of them.
I have
so,
too.
Gosh, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have to take direction from our citizens, but sometimes we have to lead, and this is a situation where we're doing something a little bit different, but I don't like the outcome. If we're asking for some huge sacrifice, like it's going to take 2 minutes longer to get from Franklin to Ogden or Sherman to Franklin as well, 2 minutes, that's an awfully long time, but
4 seconds.
4 seconds and 12 seconds to the good on the other direction. It's kind of the sleeves out of our vest from a timing standpoint.
Well, the concern that we believe we have WHA evidence for, and Schwartz believes to be minimal, I think the biggest concern everybody probably has is dispersion of traffic, right? How many people are going to see this, and when they see it, instead of taking the time and learning that it's actually quicker, are going to pick a different street? That's the core of our question. I'm like everybody, I'm inclined to think this is probably a pretty good thing, but that's where our question is. All the stuff that Rich has laid out and that Andy's laid out in front of us, there's no reason not to do this, but for that concern, which we're all probably a little uncertain and kind of thinking in the back of our minds and in our gut, I wonder, right?
Yeah.
That's really my only,
Yeah.
Sure.
hold on, I truly, that's my only hesitation. And seeing it, thank you so much for the visuals.
Yes, they're great.
Seeing it this way and being able to see, okay, people can turn here. I mean, that's incredibly helpful, and I think helps in understanding how the new flow of traffic will be. That is truly my only, the only part of me that's hesitating right now. I think the bike lanes are great.
Yeah.
I think, the chicanes on Highland, if you've ever been in a high school parking lot when students are trying to leave, as I frequently am, the first street that they hit, as soon as they get out, they fly. And then normally, once they can't see the school anymore, they're like, "Oh, okay, and it chills out and everybody's good." So, I mean, that, I'm guessing that is why Highland
same
is the
thought.
focus of the chicanes. Because you've got the parking lot right
Yeah.
here.
I have the same
Well, we
thought.
have had associated with stop signs at whatever street it is, what's the next one, Lincoln. We have had commentary over the years about speeds on Highland in general, beyond just that last block.
But yeah.
The other thing I would expect when we first start this is we will have some diversion and people get used to it. And even though it's not as much of a word of mouth, it's tracking the car in front of you, deciding to take a diversion, and then saying, oh, I got in front of that car. Nicole and I take slightly different routes here. And sometimes I'll see her at the light.
And who wins?
What do you think?
That diversion
But-
question is why I was asking about
The
traffic
chicanes.
counts through town.
Okay, yeah.
Because this is, when you describe it sort of as we're really just moving an existing condition farther. It's not like all of these people, but for this, just fly past the high school. They do, but then they all run into something at the end, right?
Yeah.
It might be helpful to get some of that anecdotal data if we could, just like was it Geneva you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to take a look at that and see what those numbers look like. Give a little more confidence in the decision, especially with the community. That might be helpful.
Because this isn't like a small, this is a long stretch. This is something, when we commit to this, we're committing. And so the fact that, I don't know, I feel like there's still that hesitation, at least for me. This is big.
My only thought, though, is that diversion in this area is actually going to take it pretty out of your way depending on where you're going. And so I think it's very natural and normal to worry about it, especially when we think about the forest area streets where they're very much, block by block you can make it. That is not necessarily the case here because of how much space north takes up and just the way that the streets are configured there. So, and especially somebody who lives close to 55th, and my only accident in my life was related to people, as I was turning left, swerving around and trying to get around backed up traffic. I think that a lot of people, as time goes on, are going to see the value of having those left turns because there's going to be a lot less nervousness of what people are going to do next, paired with the fact that there aren't really that many other routes that are going to be particularly convenient to even get you where you're going in that area. So I don't know. I guess I understand the worry from, historically speaking, some of the projects that we've done, but I do think that this one is just a little different. I don't worry quite as much with this one as I have in the past. So I'm good. Yeah,
Not hearing
I think we
any
should.
substantial objections to continuing the process, right? Is that right?
And I think for Flo, Fairview is the best example for you guys that
Yeah.
live closer to Fairview.
Easy.
That it moves, you're not competing with the left turn people.
And even when it backs up, it does clear quickly, barring any horrible BNSF backups.
And the places it backs up are where you funnel down.
Yeah,
Second going southbound, right?
Yeah.
Just north of Maples on the other direction.
yeah.
So this is exactly the kind of dialogue we were hoping to get. I want to thank Andy and his team. There's a lot of people to work with, not just Andy. These visuals, the presentation, the easy to understand technical with just common sense approach. Just to make sure that we've captured council direction, we will have on the agenda, I think next week, a motion to proceed. We'll come up with the right language, but we just want to get that in there and then we can go forward. Just a reminder that proceeding to the next step does not obligate us to construct. During the time frame between the motion and getting information back from IDOT, we have some more homework to do based on council direction. Just to summarize that, we'll take a closer look at the volume along the corridor and how it changes during peak hour. We will look to model that intersection of Franklin and Main for multiple purposes, to see if there's an and solution. That's the honest way. We'll find if there's both, right? Can we achieve both objectives there? We'll do some research as to why the chicanes were conceptually planned only at that one block. And we'll look for other examples of road diets in the Chicago metro area. We won't have all that for next week, but we don't have to. So we'll get the motion from the council, and then as this project proceeds, we can find those answers. Does that work for you, Mayor, and the council?
Works for me. Sound good, you guys?
Sounds good?
Seeing everybody's head nodded.
Head nodding all around.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the help. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.